Hey there, Summoners. It's your weekly champ rotation as we bring it to you every week. We are just going to come right at you with the champs like usual. I got my co-host here, Mr. Manslaughter.
Hello.
And, of course, I'm Peter Panic, and this is going to be the free champ rotation for week 2 of season 2, I believe. So we're just going to jump right in like we always do, and this week we're going to be talking about Alistair. You know, a lot of people disagree. We've talked about it a lot between our friends about which ability to level up first in that level 1 when you're going straight into the lane. You can really go a lot of different ways. A lot of people go headbutt. A lot of people go pulverize. Some people go with the heal, the triumphant roar. I personally, because I play a lot of AD carries, I lane with a lot of Alistairs, I prefer that they start with the triumphant roar because that way it allows me as an AD carry to play a little bit more aggressive. But you should definitely be communicating this with each other, whether or not you're playing Alistair or you're playing with him, just to make sure you know, hey, this is how aggressive we can be or this is how aggressive we can't be. Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about the build?
Yeah. All right. So if you're playing Alistair, you're most likely going to be building him support. So I'll go ahead and talk about that build. With Alistair, like most supports, you're going to want to start a Fairy Charm, a couple wards, and then finish off with health pots. And this will allow you to stay in lane, support your AD carry for as long as possible to do that mana regen. And then when you finally go back, which should only be your AD carry safe, you're going to want to buy a bunch of gold for 10s, like your Philosopher's Stone, hopefully your Heart of Gold. And then on him for boots, you're going to want to get cooldown boots so you can use his crowd controlling abilities a lot more frequently. And then you're basically just going to go straight tank depending on what your team's building.
Yeah, and like Cody said about those wards, starting with that Fairy Charm, the big thing now with wards coming right out of the gate is a lot of people are ganking a lot sooner now with the new jungle. And, I know that Riot's talked about maybe changing the jungle again. Who knows what's going to happen. But as of right now, like even with your mid play and your dual lane and even your solo lane top, there's ganks are happening earlier, so you're definitely going to want to have those wards early in the lane.
Definitely.
All right, moving on to the next champ, the second champ this week, and an AD carry, so it's right up my lane. We have Caitlyn, the Sheriff of Piltover. Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about her abilities today?
Yeah, her abilities are some of the best in-lane harassing abilities on an AD carry. Her Q, the Piltover Peacemaker, has a really long range, deals really good early game damage. But the only problem with it, which makes it only good in lane, is she has to rev up her rifle for 1 second, which interrupts her auto attack. Unlike Ash's Volley. Her next ability is called a Yordle Snap Trap. It's basically a little trap that you put on the ground that stuns people for 1.5 seconds and does a little bit of magic damage, but that's not really the whole point of it. It's just kind of like a little ward that you have that can also be used if you're taking a tower or something. You can put it next to the tower so that if they come out to try and attack you, it stuns them. Her next ability is her 90 caliber net, which is basically used for escaping. Has a slow on it, which is good. And then her ultimate is the well-known Sniper Shot. It's a ton of damage, good for cleaning up kills. And yeah, Dave, you want to talk a little bit about her build?
Yeah, definitely. Like most AD carries, you're kind of going to build them all the same, depending on which ones. But with this one especially, I mean, she scales a little bit of AP and a little bit of AD, but you're basically going to build her like you build everyone else. You kind of have to, and people will disagree, but you're wrong. You have to build Berserker Greaves on AD carries, in my opinion. I mean, you want that because you get them early and they're nice. A lot of people talk about building Last Whisper, and I think Last Whisper is more of an endgame item where you're filling in. Some people disagree. I think that your main core items of any AD carry is going to be an Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer, Bloodthirster, and then maybe another Phantom Dancer. And personally, I always start Doran's Blade. Some people start Boots, 3 health pots. I've seen some people start Vampiric Scepters. I disagree with all of these plays with the exception of Doran's Blade. It's just, you want that extra AD coming right out of the gate because you want to establish lane presence. And with Caitlyn, it's very easy to do. Like Cody was talking about her abilities. She has sick range on her auto attack, and also with those traps, they're really great for, if you're laning bottom lane, hypothetically, and throw it in the bush. And if someone tries to come in and gank you, it'll set off the trap. They'll be stunned for a second. You'll have plenty of time to get out of dodge if you need to. So, like I was saying, Caitlyn, we talked about her before. I don't think she's trash. I think she's a great champ. She is not as effective in team fights. So, that's why she just kind of misses out on the Vayne and Ashe ability, play in lane. But Caitlyn, fun champ. If you feel like learning a new AD carry, you can go ahead and play her this week. But all right, moving on to the next champ, we have our second AD carry. It's Corki, who is, I don't know, I think he's one of the funnest characters to play. He's has some really great escapability with his abilities, and Phosphorus Bomb, which is his Q ability, does, an amount of damage. But the really great thing about it is you can actually check bushes with it because it reveals an area that it hits, and it's an AoE damage, so it's great to have. Moving on to the next ability, it's his W ability, Valkyrie, which is what I was talking about earlier, his escapability, is it actually just kind of launches him out and over areas, so you can actually jump over some smaller walls, and it's great for getting involved in fights and then getting out of them, because it's a really great escapability. Also, it's great for early lane, and he scales a little bit of AP on both of those first. Now, the next one is really Corki's, I won't say bread and butter, but it adds to that damage of his auto attack, and basically it's called the Gatling gun, and it's an E ability, and it's basically you turn it on, it runs for a little while, and then it comes off. But the great thing about it is it actually has armor reduction when you use it. So it's a very good ability, and his Missile Barrage, which is his ultimate, isn't like a normal ultimate. It doesn't have much of a cooldown, really. It's just you shoot off skill shots, and the skill shots do damage. Every fourth shot, it actually does extra damage. So it's a really great ability. Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about Corki's build?
Yeah, Corki has a very similar build to Caitlyn's, which we just talked about. You're going to want to build Berserker Greaves, Infinity Edge, Fan Advances. Those are all good on him. Except for you want to try and build a somewhat early Trinity Force. Maybe after you have your Infinity Edge and one Fan Advancer, get a Trinity Force. Because he has so many abilities that you're going to be using quite a bit since they all have very low cooldowns. And you're going to get that 150% bonus damage proc almost every 2 seconds, which is as fast as you can get it. And that's huge on an AD carry. So, yeah, get that, get your Fan Advancer, Infinity Edge. And one thing I really like doing is building the Sheen part of the Trinity Force really early in the build, because once again, you get those damage procs quite often, and it helps with your harassing lane.
And obviously, I completely agree with that. I don't think it could be said better, to be honest. All right, moving on to the next champ. It's going to be Mordekaiser, and as everyone I'm sure knows at this point, I don't play melee champs that often or sustain champs, and this one happens to be both. But just so all the listeners know, and Cody can, like I've talked about it, I bought Irelia this week, and I've been playing Renekton and Irelia, so I'm making strides, people. But Cody, go ahead and just jump right into Mordekaiser.
All right, so Mordekaiser, as everyone probably knows by now, he got nerfed a couple months back. That really brought him down from his overpowered status, but he's still a very viable champion in my opinion. He scales almost all off AP, so there's no reason to really build him AD. And if you don't know, his passive is basically he has a shield that fills up every time you do damage with an ability, and it's based on the damage you do. So this really adds to his tankiness. So because of this, you're going to want to build him a little bit tanky and not just straight AP in order to stay alive long enough in order to get that shield full. Some of his abilities real fast are his Q ability is basically just an extra damaging melee attack that does a little bit of AoE damage. His W ability is a cone ability that does a bunch of magic damage in front of him. Or, sorry, that's his E ability. His W ability puts a little cloud of metal shards around either a minion or himself, or anyone really, and that does magic damage per second, which is really good for keeping your shield high. And then his ultimate, which is the main reason most people play Mordekaiser, is he basically puts a little dot on an enemy that does 34% of its target champion's max health and damage, and it does all of it over 10 seconds, half of it done initially. And if this target is killed while the ult is on it, he gets 20% of their ability power and attack damage, and he gets a pet of that ability. So you want to use his ultimate on an AD carry for maximum effectiveness. And as for his build real quick, you're going to want to build him tanky but with a little AP. So Sorcerer's Shoes are really good on him. Rylai's Crystal Scepter is good since he has no real crowd control. A Force of Nature is good on him. Abyssal Scepter to the tankiness and the ability power. And a Sunfire works really well with his Creeping Death, which is his W ability.
All right, moving on to the next champ, we have LeBlanc, another fun AP carry, who I think Cody and I both agree is incredibly underplayed. But, Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about her abilities?
Yeah, LeBlanc has amazing abilities early game. You'll probably hear me and Dave say this a couple times throughout our time talking about her. But she really drops off late game, sorry. She drops off late game really hard, but early game, she has very high flat damage on her abilities. Her Q throws a little, ball at her opponent and will do damage, and she can silence the target. If she uses another ability on them, it'll trigger the mark it puts on them and silence the champion. Her W is a dash ability. She moves to a nearby location wherever she clicks and does AoE damage there, and then she can activate the ability again and go back to where she just was. And then her E ability is her main form of initiation and crowd control, and she uses a little yellow chain that goes out and will root the enemy it hit, do damage to them for 2 seconds. And then her ultimate is she can recast the spell that she just cast, but it does just more damage. And this is really good to use on your W ability or your Q ability because they're your main forms of damage. And Dave is going to talk to you guys a little bit about the build.
Yeah, and basically on LeBlanc, like we were saying, she's an AP carry, so you're going to kind of build Sorcerer's Shoes on her, obviously. You can start out Doran's Ring. Again, I'm the kind of player that likes to come out of the gate and play aggressive, and I've played against a lot of LeBlancs, and like Cody and I were saying, she's strong early game, so I would agree with building her strong early game. Build a Doran's Ring. Obviously, you're going to do your regular Rabadons, your Void Staffs. Some people build a Haunting Guise on her or a Deathfire Grasp. All of these items are good, but basically, if it has a high amount of AP in it, it's probably good to build on her.
One quick thing, too. With the new mastery pages where you can get more gold in the utilities tree, there's really no reason not to build a Doran's Ring mid because you can also buy one health pot with it.
Yeah, starting off Doran's Ring or Doran's Blade, depending on, obviously depending on the champ that you're playing, is a really good idea. So, and I don't think that Cody and I, either one of us, disagree when you're playing your damage champs. Obviously, if you're playing tank or support, maybe not. But if you're playing the damage,
there's a reason they don't build into anything. It's because they give you a lot more stats for how much they're worth.
That's exactly right. All right, and the next champ we're going to talk about is Riven. She is a crazy, crazy little champion. Again, talking about overlooked champions this week, LeBlanc's definitely on that list. Riven is definitely on that list, and a couple champs later will definitely be on that list. Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about Riven's abilities? Yeah,
the first ability I'm going to talk about is her passive, and it's that Riven's abilities give her charges on her weapon, and they make her basic attacks do more damage. This is really used in conjunction with all her abilities, as I'll talk about in a second. Her Q is a series of damaging strikes you can do. You basically hit the Q button up to 3 times, and it does a little dash. It does damage the first time, another dash does damage the second time, and then the third time you do a flip, which is a really short knockup. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do one part of the combo and then auto attack to proc her passive, and then do the next part, and so on and so forth. Her W is the ability you're going to level up first because you can get it to such a low cooldown and such high damage. That's just ridiculous. And it's a stun that does AoE damage around you. So this is really good to use, somewhere in your combo with your Q because you'll be up right next to the champion because it's a fairly short radius. Her E ability is a really short dash ability, and when I say really short, it's almost insignificant if you're trying to run away. But it gives you a little bit of a shield that actually scales off your AD, so it can be a pretty strong shield late game. And then her ultimate basically gives you more attack damage and more range on all her abilities. And then you can activate her ultimate one more time, and it shoots out a little cone in front of you that does more damage based on the amount of health the enemy has missing, kind of like Garen's ult, except for it does flat damage plus your attack damage plus more damage if you're missing health. And Dave's going to talk about the build once again.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're going to do with Riven is you're going to build her like any other sustained character, like you would build, anyone up on that top lane. And what you're going to really go for is, Merc Treads, Heart of Gold, Warmogs, Atmas. Obviously, eventually later game, build that Heart of Gold into Randuin's Omen. Also, you want to build a Brutalizer, maybe into a Yamumu's. Very good items on Riven because, like Cody was saying, you're going to kind of build her sustain, but I mean, really, again, underplayed. Unfortunately, I think Cody said he bought her this week. I'll probably play her a lot this week because I'm playing whatever sustain character is available every week. So, very interesting champ. I think one of the best new champs, because I would still consider her a new champ. All right, moving on to the next champ, we have Shen, the Eye of the Twilight. And, literally, I think that we talked about him, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It looks like they're giving him up pretty early. And like we said 2 or 3 weeks ago, he's an awesome tank. He's really great. Cody, take it away.
All right, so just in a quick overview of his abilities, his Q is a ranged ability that does magic damage and heals any champion that attacks the unit that you attacked. He has a shield ability as his W, and his E is a dash that's a taunt, so it's really good in team fights. And then his ultimate is really what makes Shen Shen. He can teleport to a champion's location, and when he gets there, he creates a massive shield on them, which it has 750 flat damage absorption at level 16. And this takes 2.5 seconds to channel, but that's really no big deal. So basically, you're going to use this ability anytime someone important on your team is getting focused, like an AD or an AP carry. And then real quick on his passive, every 8 seconds it comes up and your next auto attack will deal damage that scales off your health. So it's pretty good for a tank. As for some items to build on him, you're really just going to want to build a straight tank. Get a Heart of Gold or something to build into a Randuin's later, since you're going to have trouble farming. She'll probably be in lane with an AD carry or something. But Sunfire, Guardian Angel, Aegis of the Legion, Force of Nature, they're all great items on him.
All right, moving on to the next champ, we're going to be talking about Sion. Again, another champ that Cody and we both kind of feel that he's underplayed. I think he's a really great champ, and I've been witness to watching a Sion just stand there and hit someone and gain health, which is always hilarious to watch. But Cody, would you like to talk a little bit about Sion's abilities and his build?
First, I will say this. Sion can be built either AD or AP. And since we've already talked about 2 AD champions, if you're going to build an AD, you just use those builds. But for the sake of new information, we're going to talk about his AP style play. And the first thing I'm going to mention about him is his passive. He has a 40% chance to ignore anywhere between 30 and 50 damage for each time he's attacked, depending on his level. So that's just, it's kind of like dodge, and they're taking out dodge because they feel those too random and overpowered. So pretty good passive. His Q is a stun that has range and is targetable, and it's a 1.5 second stun, which is really long. Does a ton of flat damage, and you're going to want to combine this with his W, which is a shield that goes around him and will explode if you either click the button again or after 10 seconds if it's not destroyed. So what you're going to want to do is activate your shield, wait a couple seconds because you have to wait to activate your shield again, go and stun them, and then use your shield again. And that'll be most of your damage throughout the game. Your E ability is a toggling ability, which gives you attack damage at the cost of health and per base attack. And when you have this activated, each time you kill a minion, you gain maximum health. So basically, you're going to want to have this toggled at all points in time because you're having your abilities to farm with, and they'll do a bunch of damage because you're building AP, and you won't lose any health because you're not auto-attacking. And his ultimate is mainly for if you're playing AD, but it also gives you a ton of sustain because it grants you a ridiculous amount of lifesteal and attack speed for 20 seconds, and it also heals surrounding champions for up to 50% of the damage dealt. So great on AD, good for sustain if you're playing AP. And a couple things is build real fast. You're going to start Doran's Ring because you're really going to be a truck in lane early game, and you're going to want to use that to your advantage to run over the other person. Ashin is very good on him because obviously he gets a bunch of damage from his E ability, so you're going to like make the most of that. Death Cap's good, Lich Bane's good. But any AP items will really work on them.
All right, moving on to the next champ. We're going to be moving on to, again, another champ that I think is really underplayed. Cody can disagree or agree, and it's Swain, the Master Tactician. He's a really great AP carry, and Cody, go ahead and talk to me about your opinions on Swain and his abilities.
All right, Swain is one of my favorite AP carries to play. I own him. Probably forgot that, but I do own him. Totally worth the 600 IP. Tons of fun to play. So I recommend that you play him while he's free. But about his abilities, I'll talk about his abilities in the order you're going to buy him, because Swain, a lot of his damage comes out of the order that you use his abilities. So his E ability is the first ability you're going to get, and you're going to use it first when you attack someone. And it does a bunch of damage over time, starting at 75, going up to 235. It scales 0.8 with AP. But during this time, which is 4 seconds, you do increased damage from all of Swain's attacks. So you're going to want to start everything you do with this. His W ability is called Never Move, which is a play on Nevermore, the poem, if you know what that is. But it's an AoE route that takes a second to activate, so it's going to take some getting used to use, but it roots them for 2 seconds and does a lot of damage. And then his Q ability is the last ability to use on someone besides his ultimate. And it does damage over time for 3 seconds and slows the enemy by a bunch. But the problem is they can get out of range of this Raven that you put down and break it off, which is why you're going to want to use it right after you snare them so you can get maximum damage out of it. And his ultimate is obviously the last ability you'll get, because you can't get it to level 6. It turns him into a giant raven that sends out little ravens that do damage to people and then give you back either 75% of the damage done if it's a champion or 25% if it's a minion. And Dave is going to talk a little bit about his build.
Yes, and like we were saying, Swain is an AD carry at its finest, and like Cody was saying, how excited you could hear in his voice, how excited he was to talk about Swain and his abilities. I mean, you're going to build him like an AP carry. You're going to build him high AP, and the greatest thing about Swain is he gets better as the game goes on. So you're just going to, normal things. Zhonya's Hourglass is always a really great item to build on AP carries. You can put yourself in that stasis, and it works really well with your ability powers in team fights. So anything like that is going to be great on Swain. Anything with high AP amount, Deathfire Grasp, definitely. Rod of Ages if you need a little bit more bulkiness to you, but anything with AP is going to be great on Swain. And yeah, he's really, really great champ. Really underplayed, like we were saying.
One quick thing about his build is you're also going to want to get a really early Rylai's on Swain, like your first AP item, in my opinion. You can agree or disagree with this, Dave. But since it slows enemies that you hit your abilities, it really allows you to either chase people down or get away with your ultimate, because it's doing that constant damage. And it also gives you the health needed to kind of go in the middle of the team fight to do that constant damage. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that those are very valid points. And one thing also I wanted to touch on, just because you were talking about the abilities, is one thing that you taught me about Swain when I was laning against him once, is once he ults, you kind of just want to get away from him, and because he can't stay in it that long. So once he ults, just kind of get away from him. He can't stay in it that long, and then attack after he comes out of the ult, because that's really the best way to play against him in lane. All right, moving on to the last champ of the night. It's going to be a support champ, and really interesting support champ. It's Zilean, the Chrono Keeper. And the cool thing about Zilean, I mean, there's a lot of cool abilities about Zilean. One of the best things I think about him is you actually get increased experience. All the allied champions gain 8% extra experience. That's only while you're alive, so you want to try to stay alive as long as you can. I guess you could say that with every champ. You want to stay alive as long as you can. But the biggest thing with Zilean, and a lot of people aren't playing him that much anymore, is they nerfed the range on his time bomb. But really, the one thing about Zilean that separates him from the other carries, the one thing that Zilean really separates himself from the other supports is he's more of an active support in team fights. Like, he really buffs champs that are going to be doing damage. And I'll talk about his abilities a little bit. His time bomb, you know, obviously does damage, so you don't really need to talk about that. It just kind of puts a little bomb over their head, and it does a little AoE damage. But that's not really, I mean, that's like, used to be the bread and butter of Zilean. But I think now, what's really great about him is his rewind ability is the same, I mean, obviously it is on purpose, is the same time period for time bomb. Basically what his rewind does is, whenever you use ability, you can use rewind, and it resets the other abilities cooldown by 10 seconds. And so you can time bomb someone, rewind, and time bomb someone next to them right, straight away. It's really great ability to have. Also, his time warp ability, which is his E ability, it actually pulls enemy champions' movement speed or increases an allied champion's movement speed. And the one thing about his slow that I've noticed, apart from other slows, is you really feel like you're dragging when you're being slowed by Zilean. And I think that if you're playing against Zilean, you're going to want to definitely build tenacity, because a 55% slow is a really, really slow.
It's a 5.5 seconds.
Yeah, you really feel like you're dragging. Like I said, it's terrible. And then obviously his ultimate, if you don't know what it is already, it's Chrono Shift, and basically he can put it on himself or an allied champion, and if someone dies within 7 seconds of him casting it on him, then they die, quote unquote, for 2 seconds. They're basically put into stasis like a Zonya's hourglass, and then they return to life, regaining health. And the health that they gain, actually base is pretty high. It's 600, 850, and then 1100, but that scales at 2.0 ability power. So it's not bad to build him, with an Abyssal Scepter, stuff like that, that's going to give him a little bit of AP as well as a little bit of resistance. Also, anything that's really going to help people, you could build something like a Crystal Scepter, like Cody was talking about earlier, because of that slow. I mean, it's really, I think the one thing about it is I feel like he's really active in team fights, whereas, the other support champs are, but this one's really buffing and really present in team fights. Cody, would you like to talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, one thing, I guess, if you're playing Zilean this week is, as Dave said, you can time bomb and then rewind and then time bomb. And I know if it's your first time playing him, you're going to be like, oh, this is awesome. You're going to get carried away doing it, and you'll run out of mana in about 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's true.
He is one of the most, if not the most, mana-dependent champ in the game. So mana items, like getting an early tier of the Goddess, we're going to talk about builds real fast, is really good on him.
And also anything with a catalyst in it. So Banshee's Veil, Rod of Ages, both of those would actually be good. I don't know if you want to build both of them at the same time, but I mean, you definitely could. All right, that's going to wrap us up, but it's everyone's favorite segment. Who's your champ of the week, Cody, that you think that our listeners should learn?
All right, I'm going to change it up. I'm going to say you should learn Swain.
No kidding.
Because, I mean, all bias aside, Swain, people could argue this, he's one of the better AP carries. Not the best, but he's fun to play. He's different. He's not very squishy because you're going to build him a little bit healthier. So he's my champion this week.
Yeah, and Cody, I'm going to have to I would normally agree with you, but since I always try not to, I'm going to say, as I always do, there's one champ every week. Learn Alistair if you don't know him yet, but we're assuming that everyone knows him. And I'll say learn LeBlanc. I mean, I guess it's just going to be the week of the AP carries because LeBlanc, really cool champ, awesome abilities, very fun to play in team fights. She's going to be the champ that I learn this week if I'm not spending too much time playing Riven and Irelia top lane, making my teammates incredibly frustrated. But yeah, I would say play LeBlanc this week. I think LeBlanc and Swain are definitely in the top 3 of the most underrated AP carries in the game. Or I shouldn't say underrated, but even underplayed. All right, and that's going to wrap us up. Cody, would you like to say anything to listeners this week?
No.
Not a thing.
Our listeners.
Changing it up. Cody hates the listeners.
Good.
All right. All right, well, I'm Peter Panic for Mr. Manslaughter. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll hit you guys up next week.